Great to be here with all of you tonight on this webinar. I've been a pastor for a long time in a lot of different contexts, and my heart really beats with passion for the mission of God and getting people mobilized to actually go out and carry that out in the world. So we're going to get started tonight so we can stay on time. And I want you to know that a Q place begins in the heart of a Christian, a follower of Jesus, an ordinary follower of Jesus, whose heart gets captured by the same stuff that captures the heart of Jesus. So basically, this ordinary follower of Jesus gets captured by the stuff that captures the heart of God. And we can read about that in several places in the New Testament. One of those places is found in Matthew chapter 9. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and sickness. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus' heart is for lost sheep, for sheep that are wandering, that are spiritually confused, that believe differently than they're supposed to, who need their eyes open, their hearts bandaged. And this phrase, he had compassion on them, actually refers to the guts of Jesus actually aching for these people, these lost people. So this is the kind of heart that starts a Q place. People that have this heart of Jesus for the people around them where they live, work, and play. So it could be your neighbors, could be your coworkers, could be people you meet at the gym or at your kids' soccer games. But as you look around you, do you share Jesus' compassionate heart for the lost sheep that are around you? Now, there's more to that heart that actually begins a Q place. The next part of that heart is this kind of willingness. And Jesus said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest field. So basically, beyond being broken for these lost people, you've got to have a heart that is excited and burns with passion to get out and do something for them. It means you've got to get out in the field and actually begin to work with these people and come alongside them. Thirdly, there's a third part of that heart that's found in the book of Acts. The earliest Christians, they had this heart. Then they called them in again. This is the Sanhedrin calling in the disciples, and commanded them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John replied, which is right in God's eyes, to listen to you or to him? You be the judges. As for us, we cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. So the earliest Christians couldn't help it. They were like passionate about what they had seen Jesus do. They were passionate about what Jesus had done in their lives, and they could not help but get with people and talk about it. This is the heart that starts a Q place. Now, all this makes me think about 1998. The best picture that year was the movie Titanic. I remember watching it with my students back then. I was a teacher in a Christian school. I was a Bible teacher, and we watched this movie Titanic. And I'll never forget the final scenes of the movie when the boat is sinking. Titanic's going into the ocean, and people are jumping off, and they're landing in the water. And then the camera pans over to the lifeboats, and we meet all these people that have gotten in the lifeboats and have kind of floated a few hundred feet away from the chaos of all these people now in the water screaming desperately for someone to help them. And these people in the lifeboat are having a discussion. They're having a conversation. They're saying, I don't know if we should go back or not, because if we go back, it's going to be kind of risky. They could swamp our boat. And someone else says, we've got to go back. Someone else says, no, we can't go back. It's going to be too dangerous. And then eventually they decide they can't go back. And if you read history, essentially what happened is the lifeboats went back, but it was too late. Most of the people had already drowned. I feel like the church today, in a lot of ways, kind of mimics this scene. It's like we're in the lifeboats, we're safe, we're secure, we've kind of got it, we're saved. And like God's calling us to go back. Jesus is saying, go back, get involved in the mission. And most of us don't have this heart to get going and go back. So as you think about your own heart starting this webinar, are you a person whose heart is broken for lost people? Are you willing to go back? Are you willing to get involved? In Ezra, it says that Ezra took with him to Jerusalem everyone whose heart God had moved. In order to start a Q place, your heart has to be moved to match the heart of Jesus for lost people. And that's the motivation that gets you going on this journey of starting a Q place. So that's where it all begins. So as we kind of start this webinar, I want you to think about, what's your heart like when it comes to thinking about lost people? Are you tuned in? Are you aware of your neighbors? Do you care that people are kind of lost and broken and going the wrong direction, where do you find yourself in your heart at this point? Does it match the heart of Jesus or not? If it doesn't match the heart of Jesus, you'll have a real hard time making a Q place really work. Now, beyond that, we have to continue. What happens next? What else is involved in this? Well, the next thing you need to know is, there's got to be a way this looks, right? What does a Q place look like? How do I go about actually getting out? I heard some of the answers on your questions. What keeps you from getting involved in these things? You may have a heart for your neighbors. You may be really brokenhearted about the people around you, even some people in your family. But when you actually think about what to do, you have no idea what to do. And this is one of the things we've encountered at Q Place. A lot of people don't really know how to engage people in evangelistic conversations or spiritual conversations. A lot of people seem like they're just kind of lost in this. And so Q Place, we've actually tried to figure out how to help you understand what it might look like. And we really have looked back to Jesus. We think we can learn some things from Jesus because Jesus was a master. His heart was broken, but then he entered into the lives of the people around him. So I want to begin by tonight thinking about Jesus specifically with his disciples. And you might say to yourself, why are we doing that? Those guys were Christians. Really? I don't think they were Christians when Jesus first called them. They were good Jewish boys who understood things about the Jewish faith. They had been trained up in all kinds of Jewish theology. They didn't really understand the kingdom of God yet. And if you think about it, you could ask yourself the question, when did these guys actually become Christians on the journey with Jesus? They were with him for 3 years. They made statements like, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then they would turn around and run the wrong direction, say all the wrong things, do all the crazy stuff. And so I think we can learn from the way Jesus moved with his disciples for those 3 years. And we can actually take some principles and apply them to our work with people around us where we live, work, and play. So let's jump into this and look at this. The first thing Jesus was really good at is he placed his focus, his majority of his focus, on a small group of people. If you think about this, he invites his disciples to follow him. It's kind of first come and see, and then it goes a little deeper. His goal was to understand these men, to build a deep relationship with them. He invited them to be with him on the journey. So just like this, to start a Q Place, you're going to invite some people to be with you on the journey. People that are around you that God has put in your sort of frame of influence, or you're in front of your eyes, in front of your face, and your heart is breaking for them. You get to invite them to be part of a small group of people that you're going to focus your attention and energies on. Secondly, Jesus walked alongside these men. His goal was to create a relational foundation where they could understand this new truth of the kingdom of God. He didn't do this in a religious setting. Think about it. He didn't do this inside the synagogue. He did it on the road. He attended a wedding. He ate at Matthew's house with Matthew's friends. He took them to the hillsides and on the Sea of Galilee and all over the country. He literally walked alongside them in public space. And as he walked with them, he helped them understand this message of the kingdom. This is very much like what happens in a Q Place. You get to walk alongside the people you invite in and kind of take them on this journey. It doesn't have to happen inside of a church or inside of a religious setting. It happens where you live, work, and play. Thirdly, Jesus understood that just like growing in Christ is a process, it's also a process to come to Christ. Now, let's look at Peter's journey just to understand this a little bit. Notice Peter, he gets introduced to Jesus by Andrew in John chapter 1. Andrew says to him, hey, this is this Jesus guy. John the Baptist told us all about him. You should check him out. So Andrew, his brother, brings Peter to introduce him to Jesus. And then Jesus comes along the shore and invites him to follow him. And Peter leaves his nets, leaves his fishing business, and jumps in. Then in Matthew 16, Peter pronounces this amazing pronouncement that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then when he sees him transfigured on the Mount of Transfiguration, he says, we should just stay up here and build some like tabernacles here and just hang out here forever. We don't need to leave. And then, of course, we go through some difficult sledding as Peter denies Jesus. He cuts off the guy's ear in the Garden of Gethsemane. He misunderstands what his role is. And he eventually goes back to fishing, says, I'm done with this. And then Peter meets Jesus on the beach after his resurrection, and Jesus reinstates him as he proclaims his love for Jesus. And then after Jesus leaves the earth, Peter gets filled with the Holy Spirit and preaches this sermon. This unschooled, ordinary guy preaches a sermon that changes 3,000 people's lives, and later understands through a vision from God that he's to bring the gospel to the Gentiles. So this same process is what we're going to be thinking about when we talk about a Q Place, taking people on a journey. That's going to be a long walk in the same direction. It's not going to be quick and easy and like praying a little prayer. This is like walking with people as they wrestle and they go through and they figure out what they really understand and think about Jesus. The fourth thing Jesus did was create a safe place. He was an amazing person at making people feel safe around him. In fact, I love in the Bible, he's defined as and described as the friend of sinners. And I love that the fact that he's the friend of sinners, all kinds of people that were labeled sinners wanted to hang out with Jesus. A cute place is about creating a safe place for those same kind of people that might not feel as comfortable coming to a church, right? And so basically, you're going to create a safe place for these friends of yours to come into and walk with you on this journey of spiritual discovery. And finally, Jesus wanted his disciples to understand for themselves. Jesus was a master facilitator, and he was great at asking questions. You know some of these questions, right? These are some of the ones that are all through the New Testament. There's dozens more that he asked people along the way. His disciples could ask question after question after question because Jesus was comfortable with his disciples having to wrestle with these questions and figure out what their answer would be, right? This is a long journey in the same direction again. So Jesus is really good at being the guide and walking them into the understanding of these questions. So here's the question you have to ask yourself when you think about starting a Q place. Could we learn a way to do evangelism where Christians actively share the good news of Jesus and the experience feels like good news for those who are receiving it? So these are the foundations of a Q place. That we really take our cues from the way Jesus moved in the world with his disciples and other people he met along the way. And our Q place principles that you're going to be introduced to in a few minutes are all related to the way Jesus moved in the world. He's kind of our example in this case. Now, I want to stop here already and give you a chance for any questions you might have. So I'm going to bring Claudia back and see if there's anyone who's typed in a question along the way that we can answer at this point. And if you haven't, you certainly can, if you haven't done it to this point.
Thanks, Jeff. One question that I have is, how do we grow our heart for people around us?
It's a great question. And in fact, QPlace has developed this resource called the 9 Arts of Spiritual Conversations. And the first art is noticing people. And I think that a lot of us as just Americans, we just have a hard time looking beyond ourselves. You know, our eyes are a lot of times focused on us and our needs and our worries and our concerns. When you actually practice the art of noticing, you start to actually look beyond yourself and notice the people around you in your workplace, in your neighborhood. You get to know the people around you. So I could tell you about my neighbors. I could tell you about George and Joanne that lived next door to me. You know, Joanne, when I moved in, was a single mom with a daughter, Maggie. Her husband was dying of cancer. She told my wife and I that she was going to stay with her husband, even though she wanted to divorce him because he was dying of cancer, and she was going to take care of him until he died. So she did. Then a few months later, all of a sudden this guy George moved in. He told me he was a recovering Catholic. Joanne identifies as a Jewish person. And he moved in, and suddenly over the fence, they were asking me if I could do their wedding. That's my neighbors on my east side of my house. So really, you know, until we get involved in people's lives and understand their stories and get to notice them and begin to pray for them, we don't really have a chance to really have a heart for them, right? So I think it's a big deal of building relationships with people that we don't really necessarily know right now, people that are around us, that God's placed around us for a reason. Another question, Claudia.
Great. I have one more question. Why do you think we have gotten away from how Jesus did evangelism and discipleship?
Well, I think we don't want to be too hard on that. I think, Paul says he doesn't really care how it gets shared, the gospel message, as long as it gets shared. I think that each era in American history is kind of different. And so back in the day, we got into the very presentational method of presenting the gospel, and it really worked back then, right? I mean, I worked in a church where we invited people to church, and they came by the hundreds, and we would present the gospel, and they'd come to the front, and that's still happening today. People are still coming to church, but we live in a different era now, right? The era we live in now is much more confused. It's much more postmodern. The millennial generation is very different. And so I think we need to acknowledge that there's a need for a different methodology. And it seems like, from what everyone's saying, the time we live in is very closely related to the first century church's time. So with the methods that worked back then might work today. So when Paul says he became all things to all men, that he might save some, it's kind of exciting to think that, we can adjust our methodology and start to move more like Jesus did in the world. And maybe for a while, it worked okay to be more confrontational and presentational and, going after people. But now it might take a little more of a different approach of walking alongside people. But I think another reason I think I would throw in there is that we typically don't like the long approach, right? I mean, we'd rather just get people to pray a prayer and then move on with our lives. Q place means you're going to be walking with these people for possibly 2 years, 2.5 years, I don't know, however long they'll stay around until you can help them understand who this Jesus is. And that's a little scary to Americans who are pretty overworked, overbusy. Our schedules are overwhelming. So we think about, man, how am I going to fit that into my schedule? That kind of gets us nervous.
All right, thanks, Jeff. That's it for the questions for right now.
Okay. So now we want to introduce Q place to you specifically because that's what this webinar is supposed to be about. And we've given you some of the foundational things that Jesus did, and we want to build off those to do Q place. So just to help you kind of get the basics down, I don't know if you know this or not, maybe you do, but Q stands for questions. Obviously, so Q place is all about throwing a question out and discussing the question. And each week, that's how the discussion starts in a Q place. It's all centered around questions that are generated by the leaders, by the facilitators. It's a small group for spiritual seekers. So you all know a small group in your church for Christians. This is a small group where spiritual seekers get to go on the journey of discovering what they believe about God, what they believe about Jesus, what they believe about the Bible. It's an intentional, ongoing spiritual conversation. This is an important point because you need to understand that this is not like a one-off conversation. We all have those one-off conversations in the supermarket or at work where we have the brilliant spiritual conversation, and then we think, wow, this is awesome. And then that person never talks to us about spiritual things ever again, or maybe not for 6 more months. Well, in this case, you're creating a space where this conversation can be ongoing and intentional. And notice, just because it's a question place, and just because questions are going to be the way we do this, it is no less intentional, right? We're still very intentionally raising questions that are taking people on a journey. We're just doing it with questions. This is a space to invite people you meet along the way to discuss their spiritual questions. So as you're living your life and going from work to school to the supermarket to places, you meet people along the way that might be lost or struggling. This is a space you have to invite them into to explore this with you. So you can always invite more people into your Q place as you meet them along the way. And this is also a group that allows you to walk alongside these people like Jesus would, people that you meet where you live, work, and play. How does it work? Well, I'm going to show you some pictures. It starts, again, with the person whose heart's been captured by the same things that captured Jesus' heart, right? So this person goes, I've got my eyes open, I've got my glasses on, my spiritual nourishing glasses on, and I see people around me that desperately need to know this Jesus that I know. So that person goes, I want to start one of these groups for those people. I want to get them engaged, but I don't want to do this by myself. So that person starts by looking for 2 other people whose hearts have been captured by the same things Jesus' heart's been captured by. And this group of Christians, these 3 Christians come together, they band together and say, we're going to form a triad of Christians, and we're going to start one of these groups. Now, these triad of Christians probably meets together for a bit. You do some praying together. You do some preparing together. We have some coaching we'll talk about later. We take you through. You make a list of people you might want to invite to your group. You make a plan for when it's going to meet, where it's going to meet, how's it going to go down. And that's this triad. And you become a team. And you're going to be a team that's leading this. And then eventually your Q place launches and you invite people who believe differently to join you on the journey. Notice that the non-Christians outnumber the Christians. That makes it a safe place. Non-Christians feel safer, or seekers feel safer when they're all together in one group. So it becomes a safer place by having these non-Christians outnumber the Christians. And that's how it works, like this. So this is what your Q place would eventually look like. These people look, kind of different, but each person would be different. Some would be really happy. Some might be struggling. Some might be confused. But you'd invite them into this conversation. Then this Q place would be governed by 4 values. The first value is the value of self-discovery. People grow and learn best when they discover truth for themselves through discussion and study. This is one of the values of a Q place. You might question this and say, wait a minute, now are you saying that we wouldn't, tell them the truth? No, we'll tell them the truth. We're just going to help them discover the truth for themselves. So when you think about your own life real fast before you object to this one too quickly, most of us learned most of what we learned through self-discovery. We actually, my mom told me, don't pop wheelies on your bike. You're going to hurt yourself. Did I listen to my mom? No. Was she telling me the truth? Actually, she was, because a few days later, I popped a wheelie, fell on my head, and had a giant bump in my head. After that, through that moment of self-discovery, I decided my mom was telling me the truth and I better listen to her and maybe change my ways. I think most people, that's how they are. Unless they really see truth coming through for themselves, they really don't know if they want to embrace it. So trying to shove truth down people's throats or beat it into them is usually not going to work too well. So that's the first value of a cute place. The second value is a safe place. An ideal environment for spiritual growth is in a small group where personal dignity is valued and leadership is shared. And so essentially, again, you saw the outnumbering of Christians by non-Christians. You know that Jesus was a safe place. We want to make this a place where people don't feel judged. They don't feel put down. They don't feel corrected right away. This is a place where they can ask their questions and receive grace and just an open-ended kind of embracing of them as people before we start kind of telling them all the things that are up. It's also a space where we believe the Spirit of God will come in and guide those who are spiritually open. And I can tell you, when I talk to Q Place initiators all over the country, they tell me how the Spirit of God shows up in their Q Place each and every week. Think about it. Even the 3 Christians being there brings the presence of Christ to your group. And then finally, as a ministry, our goal is eventually to get these people into the Bible, because we believe the Bible and the life of Jesus are very worth serious discovery and study. And so we want these people to get in the Bible and read it with us so they can discover the truth about God for themselves. So these are the values that undergird our Q Place. We even have guidelines that we give out, and you would learn about these on Q Place coaching once again. These guidelines help the group to kind of function together, and you kind of know what the guidelines are to keep this a safe place where self-discovery rules the day and we all respect each other. Now, it's hard to picture one of these groups just by sort of seeing some cartoons and hearing this explanation. So a few years ago, we actually filmed a Q Place in Denver, Colorado. We invited some folks in, and we asked them to be part of a Q Place. And they came, they showed up, and we put a camera up, and we actually ran the meeting and filmed it. So I'm not going to show you that whole meeting right now. It's too long to see the whole thing, but I'm going to show you a few minutes of this Q Place in action. This is the first meeting they ever been together. So they don't know each other. They're just meeting each other for the first time. And you're going to see the facilitator, one of the Christians, ask a question. You're going to see people start to answer the question. So Claudia, go ahead and run that video.
To sort of get the dialogue going, there's one question that I want to ask. And again, in the spirit of what we've talked about, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no judgment here. If you could ask God one question and you knew that he would answer, what would you ask and why?
What's the meaning of it all? This existence. My understanding of the scripture is like God was lonely, so he made stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really all there is to it?
Why is there a hell? Like, what's the point of that?
My question would be, if you are the one and only God, why are there other religions at all?
I would ask God, what is the relation between reason and himself?
So your question is, what is the difference between you and my own reasoning?
Well, or just the principles of reason.
Principles of
because it seems like even God would have to obey those. Otherwise, there would be no reliability in God's nature.
My question would be about imperfection, I think. All these different religions, these different philosophies, these different cultures, we wage war on each other, we rape the environment, all these things. What's the point of that?
I'd probably ask God, why is it so often that evil men prosper while good people tend to suffer?
My question kind of goes along with your question, is God, why would you allow small children to suffer?
If there's only one God, why is there so many different religions?
Yeah, I'm just fascinated. I love. Isn't it interesting hearing different people's questions? Thank you for your honesty in that.
Okay, so that was awesome. I don't know if you got the idea there. So those people, literally, that's their first night together, and you can see the honesty, the depth of their questions. It's amazing to me when I've done Q Places and been involved in them, how quickly people engage and how deep they go right away out of the gate. In fact, just so you know that I'm actually not just telling you about something that you should do that I haven't done. I led a Q place about 4 years ago that went on for 2.5 years. And it was a profound experience right in my living room. Me and 2 guys gathered together, just like I showed you before in the pictures, me and my triad. So I had 2 other Christians with me on the journey. And we invited 12 guys to join us, 8 of which said yes, and they came. So 4 guys said, no, thanks, don't want to come. The other 8 came. The first night we asked that question, if you could ask God one question, you know, we would answer. And we got 9 profound questions from these guys they would ask God. It was amazing. It was amazing. And that started us on the journey then with these guys to kind of be on this walking alongside ongoing spiritual conversation journey that would happen every other week in my living room or one of the other guys' living rooms that we were meeting with. I can tell you so many amazing stories. One week we got them into the scripture. We read the John 14:6 passage where I am the way, the truth, and the life. And they just were flabbergasted that Jesus was so exclusive. They couldn't believe it, how exclusive he was. And so at the end of the conversation, I said, hey guys, what if Jesus is making an offer that he wants you to kind of take him up on? And what do you think he's offering? And let's just think about that over the next couple of weeks, and we get back together again. You can bring your answers to that. So basically, you know, we waited 2 weeks. 2 weeks came by. The one guy walks in carrying a piece of paper, and he says to us, hey, I Googled your question. I'm thinking, oh boy. And there on the table, he slaps it down. He goes, I never heard it put this way before. He's got Charles Swindoll's gospel presentation. And he says to us, what's this substitutionary atonement mean? What's that all about? That led to us taking him out to breakfast and having some further discussions about the gospel of Jesus around this. It was amazing. Just from asking these questions at Q Place. Another night we were talking about what happens at halftime in your life. You know, what's the coach telling you for the second half of your life? And the one guy says, well, I'm supposed to get ready for eternity. And I was like, wow, Tim, that's a huge goal. Really? That's amazing. What are you going to do to get ready for eternity? And Tim says, well, and he gives me a list. I don't know, it was like 6 or 7 things he had listed out. And then he turns it back on me. He says, hey, well, you're some big religious guy, aren't you? Like some preacher or something. So if I'm doing these 6 things, what are you going to do? And I said, absolutely nothing, Tim. And he goes, what? I go, yeah, it's already been done for me by Jesus. I'm good. And Tim says, so you mean to tell me you're in the like speed pass line at Disney World, and I'm like in the line behind 3 busloads full of kids? I'm like, yeah, Tim, you can get in my line, man. It's free. And it was great how the Spirit of God settled around that conversation. And one of the other guys to my left said, I think I'm 5 busloads of kids back. And all of a sudden there was this kind of moment in the room where there was this silence and people were thinking about where they were at on this line that would get them into heaven. That night, Tim prayed in his driveway with one of the Christian facilitators in my group to receive Jesus into his life. Really cool. So this, you know, I could go on and on with these stories. In fact, I'm going to show you another video that we have here that Claudia's going to queue up about another guy here in Wheaton. He's a financial investor, and he runs this Q place actually at his office on Sunday nights with 2 other guys. And they've been inviting guys into this for the last year, having profound experiences. So this is a quick video, just a quick look at his story. So let me just show you this.
I have a heart for evangelism, want to be salt and light in my workplace and in my neighborhood. Q Place really gave me a very simple structure to set up a group of guys where we could invite non-Christians. We meet every 2 weeks, and I got to tell you, at the end of each session, I walk away going, wow, the Lord just did something there. We have seen the Lord move in these guys' lives.
So you get the idea there how profound this guy Chad is being impacted by this. You know, and there's no real formula for this. I think we typically want to have a formula, but these Q places start in a lot of different ways. One of our really experienced facilitators, Nancy, who lives in Ottawa, Illinois. Nancy started her first Q place years ago, and the first time she did it, she invited her neighbors through a letter that went in the mailboxes around her new neighborhood. She wanted to reach for Jesus. And the first day, only 1 lady showed up. And this lady walked in, and Nancy had the whole house set up for several people, and nobody else came in. And I think Nancy looked a little disappointed. So the lady said to her, hey, is it okay if we just read the Bible together, Nancy, like you and I? I know that you were expecting others. But Nancy's like, oh, sorry, yeah, that'd be great. And So, this lady says to her, Nancy, I would never have the courage to do what you did, to invite a bunch of people from a neighborhood to come do this. And so it's really cool. I'm here. I want to do this. And after a year reading the Bible together, this lady says to Nancy, hey, Nancy, I've lived in this neighborhood for a long time. Would you want me to invite some people to join us? And Nancy said, that'd be great. So this lady invites all the neighbors, and because of her capital in the neighborhood, 8 more people show up. Within a few months, one of the women gets sick, and they have to start meeting at her house. So they go to her house to meet, and her husband's serving the drinks, and he's lingering in the room longer and longer as the conversation goes on, and says to his wife a few weeks later, hey, how do I get in this group? So Nancy invites her husband. They make it a co-ed group, and they lead that couple to Christ and several other couples to Christ in their neighborhood. So, there's no formula how this works. It's about being like Jesus, walking alongside these people and waiting for the Spirit of God to do his work. We can't control who gets saved, how they get saved. We can't convict people of sins. We can't save people. That's all the Spirit's work. So you get to just trust that Jesus is at work doing this thing. So I'm going to stop with my stories here because I can keep telling a bunch of them, and I want to go back to questions. So Claudia, I don't know if there's any other questions that we need to answer before we conclude this.
Yes, Jeff, we have some great questions here. Scott wants to know, in a triad, do you typically think of a spouse as included in the 3, or is it best to have 3 non-related people?
No, it'd be great to have your spouse. In fact, we often say to couples, if you wanted to start a couples group, so you can start a men's group, a women's group, or a couples group, which would be more of a mixed group. And we say to couples, if you get one other couple who are Christians, you could form that as a triad. It's technically a quad, but that would be your triad, the 2 couples. You could certainly do it with you and your wife or you and your husband, and then invite somebody else into that to make your triad. So however you want to form that. Again, we're not legalistic about how it happens. We just want you to be out as in a teammate. Jesus sent his disciples out 2 by 2. We do the triad thing because it really creates a safer space and really diffuses the leadership in that group. It makes it so that, if there's a question on the table that is kind of uncertain, how in a typical small group, everybody turns to the one person to say, what's the answer? In this case, because there's a number of facilitators, it makes it feel like we're all in this discussion together. And it's not about finding the right answer or turning to somebody to get the right answer. Makes sense? So another question, Claudia?
Yes, Janet wants to know, how do you invite and know who to invite?
Great question. Great question, Janet. And in fact, I'm not going to, well, okay, I'll do this part. I'll say the way you know who to invite is you actually hopefully have relationships in your community with people where you live, work, and play. So for me, I was a church planter when I started my Q Place, and I was building relationships in my neighborhood with all kinds of people. I was meeting them at local parties in my neighborhood. I was coaching their kids in soccer and baseball. I was playing hockey with a bunch of pagans on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. So all those different guys and people I was meeting, they became the people that I invited to my Q Place. So in order to start a Q Place, the premise would be you actually have relationships with people that believe differently, the people that are not inside the fold of the church already, those lost sheep that we're talking about. You have such a heart for them that you just want to build relationships with them first so that you have the relational capital to get them to come to your Q Place, right? People are going to come to your Q Place if they don't know who you are. So the guys came to my Q Place because they liked me and they trusted me, and therefore they came to my Q Place. Now, in terms of how to make an invite, the great thing is that we have at Q Place coaching. And a lot of these questions about the how-tos and kind of getting into specifics, I would encourage you to join a Q Place coaching group. Q Place coaching groups go for 7 weeks. They're 1 hour a week, 1 hour and 15 minutes a week or so. They happen on the same format as this, a Zoom call like this. Our expert facilitators join you and take you on a 7-week journey. You go through the book, How to Start a Q Place, and you learn the 4 stages of a Q Place. And those 4 stages are these 4 stages. You learn how to prepare with your triad. You learn how to make good invitations. Because one thing we don't want to do in an invitation, obviously, is invite people to a dinner party, and then all of a sudden out comes the Q Place Bible stuff out of the closet, and we sort of surprise them. We want to tell them up front what they're coming to, right? You learn about the trial meeting, which you just watched in the video, where you ask this question. If they could ask God one question, what would they ask him? And then you learn how to grow your group and take it beyond the trial meeting and make it something where you're walking alongside these people, hopefully to the point where they find faith in Jesus sometime down the road. So that's all happens at Q Place Coaching, and these are the 4 stages that we train you in. So I would encourage anyone who wants to get on this journey, who thinks they're ready. The Q Place coaching groups are going to begin the week of September 18th. If you go to qplace.com, the front page of our website, you'll see that you can click there and you can pick one of 4 different coaching times. I think there's a Monday night group, a Thursday night group, a Wednesday afternoon group, and a Tuesday afternoon group, a Tuesday lunchtime group, I should say. So whatever works in your schedule, you could sign yourself up and join the journey and be part of that for the 7 weeks and really learn how to do one of these groups. And I would just encourage you this way. It'd be important, I think, to bring your triad with you to the coaching. So if you are going to really be serious about this, I would sign yourself up. And then I'd make sure to go out and start looking for your triad, the 2 people you're going to ask to join you on the journey, so that they can join you at the coaching. And if you need help explaining this to them, we're going to make this, we recorded this presentation. We're going to make this into a video link, and we'll be sending this video link out to you shortly, so that if you needed to explain to a triad member or someone like that what this is all about, you could explain it to them and use this video to help them understand it, so that you wouldn't have to feel like you had to explain it all over again, something that maybe you just are starting to understand. So that's my encouragement to you as a kind of a action step leaving this webinar. So Claudia, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yes, just one more question, Jeff. If someone is having a hard time finding either their 3rd triad member or just triad members, is it still worth coming to the coaching without a triad?
Yeah, totally. In fact, I would not let not finding a 3rd triad member hold me up from starting my Q Place. That it sometimes becomes a roadblock for some people. They get so worried about finding their 3rd triad member, they never find that person. Their Q Place never starts. So I would say, go. If you find somebody else who's willing to do this with you, jump on it and go for it. I'm going to start another group here in a few weeks, and I've only found one other guy to help me, and we're just going to go for it with the 2 of us. And if we happen to find a 3rd guy along the way, awesome. But again, we don't want to be legalistic about this. It's more about going as a team. And so I would say, and also the second part of that question is, is it, will it keep you from really being successful? No, because even if your tribe member's not been coached or trained, you'll have been coached and trained, and hopefully you can help them understand kind of what this looks like. And I think you should be able to do that. And these coaching groups are offered over and over again online. So you can always, if worst case scenario, come back to another coaching group with your triad and do it again. So.
All right, Jeff, I think that's it for questions. Is there anything else you want to close up with?
That's probably it. I just would encourage people to get going. One of our issues as a Christian church is that we typically keep learning and we don't get going. So if you're really feeling like God is kind of calling you to do this, I would pray about it, but I wouldn't pray too long. I'd get going and try to figure out what's going to be your action steps over the next week to get yourself rolling on this journey. Thanks for coming tonight. It was great to be with all of you. Hope to meet you sometime in person.
All right, wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us today. As Jeff said, we enjoyed your comments and questions. Be sure to look for our email regarding Q Place Coaching. And if you want to continue the conversation or have more questions, feel free to email us at info@qplace.com. We hope you have a great rest of your week. Have a good night.